say, if your motivation for being a contractor is to make a lot of money, you chose the wrong job. I think contractors become contractors because they like the work, or they find themselves, young in their career, making more money. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Green Building Advisor Senior Editor Kylie Jacques.
Hello, everybody.
Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor Mike Gerton.
Hello.
And our Senior Producer Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, is it a pleasure to be with you all this morning? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to be here.
Kylie, it's been a while since you've been on the show. What have you been up to?
Well, I wanted to share some thoughts that I've been having lately. I've been observing the town that I live in, which is Holden, Massachusetts, central Massachusetts. And there's, in the past, we've talked about the fact that new development in suburban towns can be poorly done. I've ranted about it, and I wanted to share something more positive because there's this little street that I take. It runs parallel to Main Street, which is a downtown, it's not like a designated historic district, but this is an old town. So that's kind of like where, the beautiful buildings are located. But anyway, I took a little walk. This little stretch. I thought, boy, this is really well done. What is it about this that makes me feel so good and want to park my car, get out and take a walk and take some photographs? So I made some notes because this is how to add new housing to existing neighborhoods in a thoughtful way, in my opinion. Why does it work? So this is not like a historic district, but it's historically rich. And so the scale is right for the existing houses. There's attention paid, or rather, they did do away with the, context, the industrial history. It's an area that has a railroad that runs through it. And there's I am assuming it was once a station. Now it has served other functions. And it's this kind of, I'm not exactly sure what's happening there, but it looks like there's some kind of industry that has become private. Anyway, it isn't gone. It's still there. So there's respect for the context. There's also a historic, the town's oldest cemetery is right there. That's not, of course, gone, but the houses that surround it kind of respect it. I don't know how to articulate that exactly, but I think scale is really what it has to do with. There's also the new construction. I included a couple of examples of duplexes that I think are really well done. They take the architecture takes cues from the local, architectural vernacular, and they make sense. They're the right size. They fit in. They're not disruptive. The other thing is there's variation in the lot. So often you see like clear-cut lots, same size, house, all in a row. This is like, some of them are set back. Some of them, they're just very nicely nestled into the topography. It's like they didn't just level and slice it. They integrated it. And there's a big difference there. It's like pedestrian friendly, it feels good, privacy is included in that. When you do that, your house is more apt to be private. There's lots to be said there, and then of course there's slices of land that have been preserved. There's land integrated into the thing. So these are I took a long walk, gave a lot of thought to why does this feel so right and so good? It feels like a hamlet. It feels like an old village, but there's new housing. for families that include density, right? So these duplexes are of a scale that makes sense with the smaller homes that exist, but also are a bit larger and accommodate more people.
What do you think, Mike? Is this respectful of this historic neighborhood?
Well, not seeing it, but just Kylie's description sounds like it's an ideal setting.
Yes.
There's so many times where you see it done where it's unappealing and you're just like, boy, that sticks out like a sore thumb. And
Exactly.
here it sounds like everything just blends together in
Yes.
that sort of aesthetic way.
Right. And
The
also just like a healthy way.
favorite photo you provided this morning, Kylie, for me was you were talking about this commercial building that likely served the railroad
Yep.
that goes through town.
Mhm.
And it surprised me that you found that building attractive because there's like a bunch of truck rear ends in the lawn and
I love it.
boxes from trailers, and I love it too.
I
It's
just
my
love it.
favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean by
Um,
pay respect to the history of his industry there. Pay respect, recognize it, accept it. Like, don't get rid of it.
it's awesome. I love
I
it.
love it too. It's
Uh,
artsy.
I had the opposite experience driving through parts of Northwest Pennsylvania, visiting the family last week, and a lot of new development in the area is just ticky tacky little houses, all the same, and on tiny lots, and it was very troubling to me because those were agrarian landscapes in the past, and now they got these little boxes lining the hillsides, and it made me sad.
Isn't there a song about that ticky tacky houses?
Yeah, sure is. I'll spare you. Mike, what have you been doing? We talked a little bit about it ahead of the show, but you've been hard at work.
Well, yeah, I've been getting bruised up doing some demolition on an old horse barn and that
Oh
we're going to
wow,
convert into a garage. So
cool.
it's it's messy at this point, like any demolition part. And at the end of the day, Addison and I stood back and I threw out the question, would it have been easier just to like bulldoze this thing over and start from scratch?
Mhm.
You know,
And I'm
but
guessing the answer is yes.
But
well, it's so hard. It's so hard to make that choice either up front, even during the process. There's a lot of we're salvaging tons of lumber, taking it apart stick by stick. And it's not, it took us a day for two of us to salvage probably, maybe 800 square feet of insulation, which was stuffed into the tack room, a bunch of tongue and groove pine boards, some 1x6 that would fill a room that's like 12 by 12, and then ceiling and walls and everything. And then there were 2x6s used as the siding over because they had an open gap so the air would flow through the stalls. All these 2x6s, probably from the late 70s or early 80s, and we salvaged, had to be at least 60 boards, 12 footers. So hoping to reuse all those on
Mike,
refurbishing it.
I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. If you're able to do it, good for you. If you're able to do
I'm
it.
guessing folks listening to the show who do construction professionally would say that the time spent to do that
Right.
isn't worth the
Right.
material costs. But
Mhm.
what's your metric for deciding if it's worth it?
My metric is I'm semi-retired and I have
Yeah. Do you
I
think
have
about
some
the
time.
carbon too? I mean, that to tease the after show. Do you think about the carbon costs there
You know,
too?
I'm interested in the carbon show because I want to learn more, or the after show on the carbon because I want to learn a little more because that is one part of construction that I am just completely oblivious to, other than
Uh,
avoid concrete.
uh-huh. Okay. There we go. Yeah.
We should say Kylie's idea for the after show was to discuss the embodied energy, embodied carbon of construction. And I think it was somewhat spawned by a piece that Martin Holliday wrote on GBA, right, Kylie?
Actually, the original thought came from something that Allison Bales posted on LinkedIn, which is like how there's a lot of confusion around the term of embodied carbon or embodied energy terminology around carbon, period. And
Mm.
so I felt like it was important to create, a fine home building story about like why care about carbon and how do we talk about it? What are these terms? Let's like tease out all of what we're talking about here. You know, why should you care about it? What can you do? What are the words that are used to describe it? How do you measure it? What are we talking about? Period. Question mark rather.
Jeff, what have you been doing? The weather's been fantastic. I think you'd agree.
Yeah, it's been nice. So I've been doing, when I'm not working, I've been out working in the lawn and in the yard and cleaning up. And
I haven't been doing anything that pleasant. Last weekend, I spent 8 hours sanding the concrete in my workshop / studio / office. And you might ask why I did this, but it's because I never did anything at the beginning. And I would tell folks, seal your concrete when you have the chance, if you want that to be a living space or to be cleanable in the future. So it got really dirty, and the only way I could physically clean it was to mechanically sand it. Blessedly, I have the use of this Festool drywall sander, and I'm sure there's some German engineer who had developed a facial tech over the weekend and couldn't explain why, but it was because I was using his beautiful sander to sand concrete. But it worked really well and captured the dust quite effectively. Wonderful machine.
Patrick, when you do that kind of work, do you have to wear, how heavy duty an aspirator should you be wearing, or is a dust mask enough?
A respirator? So I wore a disposable N95 particle respirator. I do have a cartridge respirator, but this didn't need that. The dust collection is so effective. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And I did put a fan sucking outside from in the window to keep the dust from migrating into the rest of the building while I sanded the dirtiest section of floor, which is here in my workshop, which connected to the outside and had the tractor driving on it, and oil spilled on it from oil changes and all kinds of stuff. So came out great though. Now I got to figure out what to do, and I'm going to appeal to the podcast listeners who know about clear finishes for concrete, what I should put on here. I'd like something renewable like wax, but I don't know what the steps are to do that, and I don't even know who to ask. So if anyone has thoughts on that, I would love to hear what you do with a bare concrete floor that you kind of want to just keep concrete. Do you guys know? Anyone?
No, that was going to be my question for you. What did you do for a finish?
when we bought our house, it was a new construction, and that was actually before we even moved in. The first thing we did was put down just commercial floor wax on the concrete floor in the basement. And it's been 20 years and it's still holding up.
Cool.
That's exactly what I want, Jeff. And how did you apply that? We used to do it with a rag mop when I did commercial cleaning.
Yeah.
So how many coats do you have to put down?
I just did one coat.
And where do you even buy like those commercial products, Jeff?
I think I bought it at Home Depot. I mean,
I'm sure there's a lot to know about this subject.
Yeah,
And,
it's a cool subject.
why I didn't do it in the first place, and it's dumb, is like I didn't know what to do. And sometimes if you put a coating on something, you are committed to that forever. And I was like, I might want to put tile down someday, or I might want to stain the concrete chemically. In any case, if you put something that would prevent adhesion or penetration, your options are way more limited. So, but what I did is not what to do.
What about the whole technique of just forgive my ignorance here. I just don't know a lot about this subject, but like just polishing. What is just in the like design stories that I've done, they often say it's a polished concrete floor, or the slab is polished for the finish.
I love that look, Kylie. You see a lot in commercial spaces now because it takes a lot less maintenance than some of the other products that they used to put down. But you need special gear. I'm sure you can rent it. I don't know how to run it. I think you could get in trouble if you didn't know what you were doing. Mm-hmm. Mike, do you have any familiarity with polishing concrete? No.
Nope. No.
It's a good look. I like it too.
I thought it was
although for residential, like in a finished condition space, I can't help but wonder if it would feel cold. Like I would imagine throw rugs would be a thing in that situation, just to soften.
We'll have to ask Ian because he lives with it every day. So
yeah,
I think he just painted his, which was something else I considered.
Yep.
This comes from David from Sweden. Hey, I had to look up how to pronounce it. Universal batteries came up on a recent podcast, and the CAS batteries were mentioned. Metabo and Mefel are two of the better-known names on that system. Now Bosch is starting an alliance, and that appear to have Fine as a partner among other professional brands. I'm forwarding a marketing email. It's in Swedish, I know, but the video link is in English or British. Check out the AAT stair climbing vacuum fire bin. Not sure what it is, but it lifts itself up one step at a time. Anyhow, thought this might be of interest. Not sure if it'll make it to North America or not. Well, David, thanks for listening, and thanks for tuning us into this battery system, which we talked a little bit about in a previous show. I was invited to a press event that Bosch was throwing about how they're going to be joining this universal battery platform, and I'm tempted to go to see what that's all about. This comes from James. Hey, podcast crew, as a building code engineer in Canada, I always worry when emails start out like that. I really do.
What'd you do now, right?
I hope to add some clarification on the building code requirements for vapour with a U barriers in Canada discussed in episode 549, which are perhaps less different from the U.S. than sometimes thought. The National Building Code of Canada, which is a model code adopted with slight variations in each province, gives the requirements for vapour barrier material for houses in Article 9.25.4.2. The vapour barrier must have a permanence of less than or equal to 1 perm, equivalent to a class 1 or 2 vapor retarder in the IRC, and can be any of the following materials: polyethylene, of course, membrane-type barriers, and other polyethylene coatings applied to drywall or foamed plastic insulation. 6-mil poly and spray foam are widely accepted as vapor barriers by building inspectors, so why don't we hear more about the other membrane-type barriers and coatings? Part of the challenge is that the products must be tested to the Canadian standards listed in the code. But certification can be expensive, think hundreds of thousands of dollars, so companies often only test to American standards, which some inspectors may accept, but others may not. The most straightforward way to demonstrate compliance with the building code for construction products in Canada is to get an evaluation report from the Canadian Construction Materials Centre, CCMC. Based on some quick searching of smart vapor retarders, CertainTeed's membrane had this CCMC evaluation done in the 2000s, but it expired in 2019 without being renewed for reasons that are not clear. ProClima's Intello Plus states on its website that it also meets Canadian testing standards, but doesn't provide any proof, although maybe they would if asked. I could only find vapor retarding paints tested to U.S. standards, so again, this would be at the discretion of the inspector. I know that many of these products are accepted by inspectors in Ontario, so just best to check before you start. Finally, a side note, if you're using our beloved tuck tape to seal your poly as an air barrier, you have to use the blue version, which has more adhesive, as poly is hard to stick to. The red version, which is about $2 cheaper and has less adhesive, is only for sealing exterior WRBs as air barriers like Tyvek. Hope that helps, James. Well, James, thanks very much for your help with these subjects. What do you guys think?
I think this comes down to the same problem a lot of small manufacturers of building products in the U.S. run into with getting evaluation reports that would show compliance with the U.S. code. There's a big cost involved in going through these evaluations, and it sounds like it's very expensive through going through the Canadian Construction Materials Center approvals. So that can set back a lot of products, especially something that's kind of a generic thing, like say craft-based paper or craft paper for a vapor retarder as a class 2. It's kind of a generic material. So which company is going to step forward to get the approval, knowing that once it's approved, that all their competitors would probably have like approvals at the same time. So it's kind of a quandary there.
I found it interesting that they don't have a single coating type vapor retarder approved, which to me, that's a reliable, easy way to do a vapor retarder without all the fussy taping and what have you, right?
Yeah.
Vapour. Am I saying that right? This comes from Scott in Lebanon, Ohio. Hello, podcast. Regarding the house design questions in episode 555, the cost and complexity of ICF should absolve them of the cost and complexity of geothermal. In our house, which is not ICF, when we modeled the energy savings of geothermal versus a heat pump, the payback was 60 years. Our energy here is relatively affordable, about 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Well-insulated and air-sealed homes shouldn't need geothermal, which seems best for old, leaky, inefficient homes, and I might add ginormous ones too.
Right. Yeah, he makes a good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And can we please stop calling it geothermal? I mean, it's a ground source heat pump. I'm so tired of hearing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Patrick, duly noted.
It's not the right term. We don't live in Iceland.
Right. It's not the right term. Mm-hmm.
You know what I've heard about ground source heat pumps is that the efficiency calculations don't take into account the pumps that are required to run the refrigerant loops or the ground loops. You're nodding, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, and it depends on the type of ground loop system, whether you have a closed loop system with like a slinky loop of polyethylene tubing, or whether you have a deep drilled well and you're circulating it with a well style pump. Yeah, those energy costs for running the pumping can be quite high.
Are people still putting those systems in, Mike?
Yeah, from what I get, it doesn't seem like it's a widespread use, but
Yeah.
I hear anecdotal evidence of people putting them in all over.
You know, I think
And
it makes a
it's
lot of sense for commercial and
Commercial,
big structures, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
buildings that have a lot of load based on their size, not their efficiency or inefficiency. If you're building even close to modern codes, you don't really need this unless the structure is immense.
Right. Okay. Yeah. On
and they could be
GBA.
They became really popular when, before air source heat pump efficiencies went up to be able to work in colder climates. The geothermal back in the late 90s, when I was installing systems with my plumbing and heating contractor, it was like the only go-to for high efficiency electric based heating systems. But now with the air source, it completely changed the map on that.
You're saying, Mike, that we just didn't have the air source heat pumps that would work reliably in the colder temperatures of New England, Northeast, and the upper Midwest, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So you needed the ground loop because it was much warmer.
Yep,
Yeah.
warmer and stable temperature, yeah.
Don't you find it exciting how that has changed? The fact that heat pumps are now suitable for very cold climates. I just think that's great. It's like problem solved. And people are always asking about that, wondering about that, concerned about that. But the truth of the matter is they work. They are now designed to work in cold climates.
We have a long period of demonstration projects that show that they work. My only worry is when they break, who the heck is going to fix them? Because the technology is pretty sophisticated compared to the systems of decades past. So I worry that the techs are not up to speed on working on this stuff.
And homeowners also need to know what they should be doing maintenance-wise to, on an annual basis to keep them in good order, right? I think that's part of it.
Change your filters.
Yeah.
Someone wrote to the podcast recently, and I thought they made an excellent point, is that the filters in, a wall-mounted cassette are not that great. They're like equivalent to what's in your window air conditioner. It's a loose fabric that catches, rocks and stuff. But if you want real particle filtration, you need a better filter. And you can't really do that on these little units because they don't have the ability to deal with the static pressure of a 4-inch thick filter. So, central systems are, I don't know. I don't see them going away because we need to do more than just make warm and cool air.
True. Yes.
I'm on my soapbox today. I better just calm down.
I like when you get on your soapbox.
This comes from Moral Quandary. Greetings, FHB podcast friends. I write for your perspective on a sticky situation, perhaps more related to ancient considerations of commerce and human nature than construction. I am like super
I'm
intrigued
in.
already.
You're right. I'm in 100%.
I've been longtime friends with some folks who work in the trades and do residential contracting. Over late night beers at a party at one of their houses a few weeks ago, it came up that it's common practice in the area to add a premium or upcharge to jobs in certain towns and neighborhoods because the clients can afford it. I was surprised that this wasn't said like a dark secret being exposed, but an obvious, well, duh, fact of business. As a DIYer, I appreciate my engagement with renovation work is on my terms. I have the luxury of not having to support my family with a hard job that wears out the body and respect that trade, and manual work is too often unfairly devalued and underpaid. But as someone fortunate enough to live in one of those can afford it towns and who will be paying student loans until I retire, the notion that the price is different based on my zip code or what someone else thinks my finances are irked me. Money and class and fairness are complicated subjects to unpack, but as I've been preparing to hire a contractor to build a garage, this has weighed on my mind, perhaps unreasonably complicating an already difficult decision. I think the fairest thing to do is go with the plan and proposal that work for me and not worry how the figures were calculated, and just appreciate the final product. Maybe this is too provocative a topic for the pod, but I'm certainly interested in the gang's thoughts on this. I don't think there's any topic too provocative for the podcast, but this is a great subject and one that I think about a lot. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'm curious to hear your thoughts because you said you think about it a lot, and I have never thought about it before. So I'm curious to know, what do you think? I mean,
well, I think about it in the context that a lot of the stuff that's in Fine Homebuilding is built for people who are very wealthy, and this is often not even their first, second, or third home. And that troubles me greatly because, there are so many people in this country who need a house and cannot afford one. So that bugs me. And should folks who have more income pay more because they can afford it?
But I don't think that a contractor who would charge more in an affluent community for a like size and scale and scope job as one that would be in a less affluent community is taking the increased profits from that more affluent community and to subsidize the other jobs that they're doing. I don't think it might just be they knowing that if I can charge more here or price it higher and I'm not going to get any pushback, maybe is what they're thinking. I don't know. I've never
I
encountered
know.
this
Yeah,
myself, but
I know. I don't know what to think about it.
I've never talked to contractors who've marketed themselves. Well, I shouldn't say that. Who have purposely priced jobs higher because of the community that they're building in. Usually
Well,
they have their metrics for how they price a job, and the price no matter who's asking for the same scope of project. They may be uh, putting a scope of work and material lists and amenities together for a proposal for a project in a high-end community, which is going to be in keeping with the
right.
homeowner's expectations,
Mhm.
as opposed to something more economical. I think that's
Right.
where the difference
Yeah,
comes in.
yeah, that's what I
And
was just thinking.
it's got to be an apples to apples comparison.
Right,
But I
right,
don't
right.
know. This seems like the moral quandary is sort of the issue is price gouging to rich people, I guess, is more
Yes,
the
it
issue.
is. And
Yep.
I think it's more complicated than that. And what the phrase that sticks with me is I've heard it said at JLC Live, charge enough to do a good job.
Uh-huh.
And you have to do that. And I have to believe that in many cases, contractors are traveling a greater distance if they're working in affluent
Mhm.
neighborhoods because there's good chance that their workers at least don't live in those neighborhoods and have to travel in rush hour traffic or in other conditions that make it more difficult to get
So
there.
true,
And
Patrick.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a
so
really good point.
I
Yeah,
think it's more complicated than this.
right. It's the comparison aspect that you were saying, Mike, the apples to apples. Yeah, I can see. It's so fascinating though. What an interesting topic. Yeah.
I'd like to hear from listeners if
Mm.
there are contractors out there who do purposefully price projects of equal scope and scale when you're working in a affluent community. Do you price higher? just because you think you can.
Is anyone going
I
to admit to that?
well, you don't have to put your name on the
True.
query when you
True,
send it in.
true.
You could just say,
Right.
yeah.
There are other conditions working in affluent communities too that make it more of a pain. You might have neighbors that don't want you to make noise before
Mhm.
8 or 9 o'clock.
Mhm.
You might be required to like hose off the street when excavation equipment and trucks come and go. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
there are a host of reasons why it can be more expensive to work in one neighborhood versus another.
It's interesting to think that it could be more labor intensive to work in an affluent neighborhood than or project than something that was repicturing something in a that you would assume would be more labor intensive. But when you factor in all these other little aspects that
Oh,
you're talking about, Patrick, maybe that's not necessarily true. A gut job in a easily accessed, multifamily house versus driving an hour and a half to get to and then having to be pristine about all of your work and tie it up every day. And, it's a different work style too.
I don't know. I've it, when I've worked on projects in affordable communities, just your average shotgun ranches,
Mm.
we always take the same attention to detail in making it clean, keeping the site clean. We don't cut corners just because we're working in a rough and tumble neighborhood even.
Mhm.
And I've worked in some really rough and tumble neighborhoods
You might be the
for
exception,
a
Mike, though.
well, maybe. I think there are a lot of contractors that are just conscientious out there that no matter where they're working.
Mm,
And
I hope so. Yeah.
I gotta say, if your motivation for being a contractor is to make a lot of money, you chose the wrong job. I think contractors become contractors because they like the work, or they find themselves, young in their career, making more money doing that than they could in other pursuits, and then at a point you get kind of stuck in it, or it just becomes your life.
Mm.
As Mike suggests, I'd love to hear others folks' perspective on this, and what a great question, Moral Quandary. Thanks.
Yeah.
This comes from Dale. Hello, Patrick. In our home, we have a double-sided gas fireplace with one side open to the master bedroom and the other side open to the master bath. The main gas valve failed and a replacement is not available, so I plan to replace the gas fireplace with two electric fireplaces back to back. The first place I looked for information was FHB. Several searches revealed essentially zero information about internal electric fireplaces. This would be an excellent topic for an article covering technologies used to produce the flame effect and the pluses and minuses and code requirements of using them. You'd cover how much heat to expect, the installation ideas, power consumption without and without the heater on. I've contacted you before on other topics and have listened to every podcast since number 1. My normal routine is to listen Sunday mornings when the dog and I go for a 5-mile walk. You have a great team. Keep up the good work. Regards, Dale. Dale, thanks for the kind words and thanks for listening. Electric fireplaces. What do we think, team? I don't know. I'm brought to mind the Sears Christmas catalog from my youth when I think of electric fireplaces.
I like the whole back-to-back idea. That's different, and I'd be curious to see how that comes together.
there are just so many of them on the market. One of the things when I used to do a lot of reviews for Fine Homebuilding is just narrowing the field of what we would review in a certain product or tool category, because once you start scratching, you find there are just too many. And when I just did a quick search on electric fireplaces to see what I could learn a little more, oh, it was like 2 or 3 billion hits on
Wow.
Google. So I don't think it's something we could ever appropriately review, because there are all sorts of different types, hardwired ones, plug-in ones, and it looked like, from what I could tell, they all had, or they all should anyway, have a listing, like a UL listing, so that would be the qualification and the manufacturer's instructions for proper use and installation. As far as the amount of heat and the power consumption, that's all based on watts. I mean, it's some of them are going to draw more current than others, and what you put in is what you get out as far as the heat. So it's almost it's like a whatever it is, like point 0.9 something percent efficient. So it means that you're that when it's drawing power, it's turning that into heat in one way or another. So I don't know if there's much in the way of evaluating efficiency on those. So I think look for something that appeals to you, that will fit the space, and then evaluate it on cost after that.
I was blown away at the Builder Show in the last few years of how many offerings there are. And if you want a fireplace in your passive house or your super high performance home, this is kind of your
Just the
only
way,
option, because you
right.
don't need makeup air, you
Right.
don't need combustion air. So
Mm-hmm.
my understanding is the ones that kind of like make a mist of water and then project some voodoo through it, makes a pretty realistic looking flame. Like I said, I kind of think of the light bulb and the little rotating disc, when I think of these. Kylie, this is a thing in the green building world for the reasons I just mentioned. Have you heard of?
Yeah,
Yeah, what do you
tight
think?
houses and how they still want their wood stoves, or yeah. Yeah, no, I didn't see a ton. I mean, I did look at GBA to see if there was anything specific about electric fireplaces. It didn't get a lot of hits, but yeah, I mean, I really don't. I'm not sure what to share here.
There was one going in the Greenwich Fine Homebuilding house I know, and it had this kind of water mist technology. And I'm hoping there are other folks out there who have used these, and what they have to say will weigh in on this subject.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Dale. I think this is good fodder for a Fine Home Building feature, discussing the things you suggest, especially in the context of replacing your unvented gas fireplace, which nobody
Right.
should be running in their house. If you want that look, this is a way better way to have it without poisoning yourself and your family.
Yeah, we absolutely should cover that because of this propensity toward more high performance homes and tighter envelopes and the need for it. So
How would you
it,
narrow the field of what's out there on the
yeah,
market?
no,
That's always the
I don't
big
think.
I think it's got to
challenge.
be stuff that's built in, and I think it's got to be stuff that doesn't look ridiculous, like I was, alluding to earlier, right?
Yeah, some good options.
Yeah, I can see the opening lead photo as being a comparison between the old one you're mentioning, Patrick, where it's got the old colored wheel, and one of the new ones, just to show that the effect that they can create now, gives you, in on passing glance, it looks like flame.
I mean,
But
I
of
only ever
course,
see them in a commercial setting, like restaurants. Like
mhm,
shishi restaurants will have them.
well,
I haven't seen them in homes. Have you all?
Just
I
that
think
one example in the Fine Homebuilding
Yeah,
house, Kylie. Yeah.
yeah.
I like multi-purpose things, so I would
Mm,
probably opt for the LED screen
mm.
with the just the
Uh,
just a flat panel TV
yeah,
with the fire going in the
right,
background.
right.
You
Same,
just have one of
same
the
difference.
non-glare screens, and it almost looks like a regular. It is.
It's pretty
It's a
impressive.
continuous
Yeah,
loop
and you
of
buy your little
fire.
milk house heater and you put it,
Yeah,
in the corner and blow it on yourself, right? And
yeah, yeah.
So weird. I'd
Well,
one of
rather
my
these
just
favorite
questions.
I'd rather go have a fire pit outside.
Yeah.
one of my
Yes.
favorite
Yes.
MASH episodes. I love the
I love
sitcom
MASH.
MASH.
Yeah, me
They
too.
ordered one of these and had it in the swamp, and they're like huddled around it, and it
I
turns
remember
out it
that one.
took until like June to show up, right, from the States, and they like take their blanket off, and it's they're in their shorts. It's hilarious.
MASH.
Are you a fan, Kylie? You're the right age.
Such a fan. I used to
Yeah.
record it and re-speak it like ridiculous.
Mike was too busy working instead of like watching it in syndication, at
Right.
4:00. How about you, Jeff? Were you a fan?
Oh yeah, huge fan.
Such a good show.
This comes from Justin, a crazy 33-year-old mailman in northeastern Oklahoma, and he
love
signed that. I didn't assign him that title.
I love that title.
Greetings, FHB crew. My wife and I have been living in our current house for the last 7 years or so, during which we've been learning a lot about the joys of home ownership.
Joys in quotation marks.
I've listened to several hundred episodes of your podcast over the last year. I picked up a number of books and I've done a lot of reading on your content, but something I can't seem to quite track down is information on dealing with brick veneer. Here are some photos of my current issues with the veneer on my house. The windows are of great concern as two bricks on the upper left corners of two of my windows are completely loose. I've sent a follow-up email containing a few more pictures and a short video. These windows are both west facing and located on the south side of the home, on one into a bedroom, the other a bathroom. Only these two windows have the issues as I've checked every side of the house and window. The caulk seals have also separated out around the edges of the window. Since there is evidence of settling or a sagging foundation, or what I assume to be a foundation issue with the presence of cracks in the mortar under the bathroom window and cracks and a split brick near the bedroom window. The drywall is cracked inside as well in very similar places. I've patched these cracks several times, and since they keep opening up, I believe there is either still movement going on or there is some other type of event. This is a 1960s home that I know is very leaky and energy inefficient, and does have some issues. I should also mention that we do have some seismic activity and experience the odd quake every now and again. I forgot to mention we live in Northeast Oklahoma, Bartlesville, if it helps any. The section of veneer that is most concerning, however, is the north side, where you can see a total separation and shifting of the upper portion of the wall away from the bottom. I am concerned about water penetration in the spring and summer and potential ice expansion issues in the winter. Walking around the house, I also noticed that there is not a single weep hole that I can find. How do I address these issues? I'm almost afraid to see the condition of the sheathing and insulation behind. Thoughts, suggestions on where to start? Thank you for your time and consideration, and I hope that this may produce some good fun, entertaining, and hopefully educational discussion and present some starting points for me to begin working on my house and solving these issues. Sincerely, Justin. What do you guys think? So brick veneer, are we adequately covering it in fine home building? And I'm going to say probably not, especially
Masonry.
problems, right?
I looked back and I couldn't find anything about the problems. I think it'd be a great topic because there can be so many things. And Justin's illustrating at least 3 or 4 points just here that could, start the problem, listing out the problems we would want to cover in an article.
Mike, where does he start? Because I don't know what to tell him, frankly.
Can we just 1 sec and say,
Sure.
is it like reservoir cladding in general, that all of what this is not specific to brick veneer. It's reservoir cladding and masonry cladding, right?
I think it could
Am
be
I right?
there's a combination. There are the physical aspects of brick veneer when it's used with wood frame homes,
Mhm.
and then there are the moisture
Right. That's what I'm
dynamic
thinking about.
that
Right.
you're probably thinking,
Yeah.
Kylie, and
Yeah.
how traditional brick, like the clay bricks and the mortar joints, will absorb moisture. And where's that moisture going? Is it moving to the inside, to the airspace? Is there even an airspace that has continuity from the bottom to the top so that it can back vent? There's all sorts of dynamics going on with these systems. And that's why, Justin's point of, hey, that really hasn't been addressed in fine home building, and like what could be going on? What are the things you want to look out for? So one of the things to keep in mind is that a brick veneer on a house is there as the siding. It's not structural, and it needs to move independently of the wood frame building. Or excuse me, I should say the wood frame building has to move independently of the brick. Generally, there's what's called a brick shelf, which is formed into the foundation, which is part of the, supporting the whole structure. And then the bricks rest on that. Now, the masonry is not going to move once you stack those up. But this house being built in the 1960s, there's a better than average chance that it was built with green lumber. It wasn't kiln dried like most of the lumber we get today. So when they framed the house, it may not have had enough time for all of the wood to shrink to equalize before they put the brick veneer on. So that could be in part what's happening with both the cracking in the plaster on the inside, as well as the caulking joints between the brick veneer and the windows. It can also lead to all sorts of other problems with the windows not operating well because they get kind of pinched as the building behind the veneer settles.
Mm.
The brick doesn't move, so the window sills end up pressing down on the bottom of the brick at the bottom of the windowsill. Um, so yeah, there's all sorts of little problems that can arise that need to be maintained. Those caulk joints have to be removed. The contractors, when they're putting the building up, have to leave enough, or the mason has to leave enough of a gap between the bricks that are aligned with the bottom of the windowsill, so there's enough of a gap to account for that shrinkage and all sorts of things. So to get
Boy.
to the individual points, um, Patrick, do you want to pick off on the individual points and throw some things out on that?
I want to say that, brick veneer is often problematic because it has poorly detailed WRBs behind it. And if you have mortar filling the cavity, the airspace that is supposed to be between the brick and the sheathing, which is commonplace because masons, especially in eras of this home, these things were thrown up. They were not doing a lot of care to keep that space clean. And now there are products meant to go in the bottom of that airspace and allow drainage. So, oftentimes in my experience, these homes have these wood fiber sheathing products. And they're especially problematic with reservoir claddings because, the cladding gets wet, it gets baked by the sun, it drives the moisture into the wall cavity. There's little to stop it because these wood fiber sheathing products are so vapor open, it allows that movement of vapor to go towards the interior and do all kinds of stuff.
The most common sheathing at that time, this house was built, would have been plywood, right? Am I right to think that?
It could have
all
been. I've seen board
depends.
sheathing behind
Yeah.
houses like of this era. I've seen plywood. I've seen this wood fiber stuff. I've seen. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Those are the
The
three
main
big
things.
ones.
Yeah.
Mike, was I getting to what you were wanting to talk about?
Well, I think that that's part of it. Yep. I think if we look at the issues of the points that Justin's, I only saw one of the photos of the bricks on either side of the window, at the top left and the top right. Now, generally, there's going to be a metal lintel, like basically a big chunk of angle iron that's going to support the brick veneer above windows or doors, and those are going to rest. They're structural for the brick veneer, so they're going to the shoulders of the metal lintels will be resting on the brick. So if you've got any loosening of bricks in the corners around windows, that could be a evidence of some sort of a structural problem with the brick veneer, especially if you're getting cracks. Whether or not it's related to any problems with the foundation, it may or may not be. Even when you have an adequate foundation and there's no sinking or settling of the foundation, you can still get cracks in the brick veneer, especially propagating at the bottom corners of windows and doors, and the top corners, just because of the way the loading is on the brick veneer. You're going to end up, anytime you've got a corner, it's going to be a spot where you can get some cracking in the mortar joints. The best thing to do is have a knowledgeable mason, come out and look at the job. The
I want to
problems
stop
are
you there.
very.
How do
Okay.
you know who was a knowledgeable mason? Because
Okay.
I think that is a
I was
hard
going to
thing.
avoid that completely because I know who I'm going to call in my area because they're old. They're older than me, and what they have the experience of being the ones who
Fix
installed
stuff.
jobs in their younger years
Mhm.
incorrectly, gone back to look at them, seen what they did wrong, and then they've remedied it.
Mhm.
So but there again, there could be some younger people that have learned from older people. I don't know how to crack that one. That's a problem whether you're hiring a plumber, electrician, a framer, a trim carpenter. How do you evaluate their knowledge base?
HVAC
I don't
designer.
know. I don't know.
HVAC
But
design, any trade, right? Yeah.
Any trade, yeah.
yeah. But you
You
really need
know,
somebody that knows what they're looking at and can evaluate it. Um, The
Justin, it would be really easy to think your house is falling down. I don't think your house is falling down. Problems with brick veneer are seldom huge problems, but you could have rusting out brick ties that are making that
bulge.
do a bulge or do
Yep.
weird things, and that's super common. People don't realize it, but mortar is somewhat corrosive, and especially if it's on the right side of the house and those ties get wet, and they will rust out. And I think anyone who's done any remodeling has seen evidence of that, and it can happen in decades.
And that can be a real structural problem with the brick veneer. If the only thing that's holding that brick veneer and keeping it straight up and down is actually the wood frame building behind it, that the brick ties which go between the mortar joints and screw or nail to the wood frame walls is what's supporting that brick, because it's just one brick course wide, so it's only 4 inches wide, and it can bulge. I have seen them where they've collapsed, where they've actually pulled far enough away that they eventually start falling off. And usually it's catastrophic, which is a dangerous thing. In other words, it doesn't like one brick fall off and then another, and it needs
It
to
all
be
falls at
repaired.
once.
It all
Yeah.
just goes bingo. And there are systems where they can reinforce it from the outside. They don't have to tear your building apart to fix that.
I think, Justin, this is a perfect opportunity to buy one of those little borescopes you see advertised on Amazon. Drill some holes, put it in there. I think these things get as small as 3 millimeters, which is a tiny little hole. Drill it in the mortar joint and peek around in there if you can. And I don't know if that's going to work, but I would think it would be pretty fun.
And with regard to the weep holes at the bottom, often
There are
that's
none.
well, even if they did leave them, often people putting mulch and plants up towards close to the building, they've covered them.
Yeah, they
So
get plugged up.
dig down like 4 or 5, 6 inches around the perimeter and look if you can see them. They might be filled in with dirt, but they could be there.
My guess is the vintage of this home, that was not on anyone's radar. That's
Right.
a comparatively new thing to be concerned with.
And he doesn't mention whether it's a 1 or a 2-story home or how tall it is. If it's just a 1-story, it's much easier to work on than when you get to taller buildings. Taller buildings with brick veneer have more problems, particularly with the windows up on the second floor.
This home has amazingly deep overhangs too, which is hugely helpful
that's
because
that's
the
good.
brick is
Yeah.
not going to get as wet as if it didn't have such good overhangs.
I keep seeing this. There's something that I see around here regularly, which is colonial style home, true colonials built in that era, with a brick gable end. The gable ends are brick siding. It's not brick veneer, but I'm
Mike's
just thinking,
nodding. I've never seen this. What's
Yeah.
this about, Mike?
I had never really noticed it before moving here.
We got a question that came into the Ask the Experts column for the magazine, and I seen it in Pennsylvania on a few houses and in Massachusetts on a few houses where it's the gable ends. It's like they wood framed the
Right.
walls on the front and the back, and it's actually stone or brick is filling in. It was done on, I think it was done on post and beam construction, and they would just fill the gables in with brick or masonry, and there was no wood frame on the inside. It was just the brick, and they plaster over it on the inside.
Because the brick was less expensive than the wood, presumably.
for infill. Yeah,
It makes no sense, but
It's really attractive, but I'd love to see the inside. So are you saying that brick is not structural, or is it?
the
I don't
gable ends
understand.
on a gable building are
Right.
not load bearing.
They're not load-bearing,
They're
okay.
just
Fill.
walls.
Got it.
yeah.
I don't think
Yeah,
I
it
knew
was
that.
I saw the pictures of it. It was real interesting because it gets into all the dynamics of line-based mortars versus concrete mortars, and when people start doing repairs and then the problems that they end up creating. But
I got to say, I think one of the blind spots in Fine Homebuilding's content for decades has been masonry generally. Not enough veneer not enough building with masonry, and John Carroll's been doing all the heavy lifting, and we need some new blood in the stable for masonry subjects. So if anyone listening has a good mason, brick or stone or whatever, if you'd put us in touch with them, I'd be grateful.
I love how people are sending us content ideas. I keep it common.
Yeah. Boy, one thing I've observed about smart companies is they listen to their customers and do what they ask for. And it seems like a very simple thing, but it's not.
Right. Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Just ask Microsoft. I don't know how that company stays in business. I really don't.
I hear that.
Well, I got to do something here before we go. Kurt, you asked about your improving the seismic strength of your house in where was this? In Seattle. We didn't get to this week, Kurt. I told you we would, but next week, stay tuned. Folks, you'll want to listen to this because Kurt has a bungalow, a beautiful house, and it's on pony walls. And his question is on how to both seismically upgrade this house and make a conditioned crawl space or semi-conditioned crawl space. It is a deep kettle to dive into. So I think we're going to save it for next week because we just don't have enough time. But good question, right? This is not an easy thing to remedy.
I have 2 pages of notes.
Oh, wow. So Mike needs to be out next week.
And I'm sure, Kylie, you lived out in that area, so you're familiar with the buildings.
This
type of building and the seismic requirements that you see all of the buildings in Seattle going through the past 20 years.
Yeah, construction there is really interesting to think
about. So even if,
the
seismic concerns are not the same, this type of structure is everywhere. And it's hard to fix because of the complicated roofs and the kind of crawl spacey arrangement underneath. So very good stuff. Kylie, do you want to remind folks of what our after show is about?
Yeah, we're going to talk about embodied carbon or upfront carbon emissions, just carbon in general. Why do we care about it? What do we need to know as building professionals? And
I'm going to toss out the term embodied energy because I think so much of there's so much overlap because, things are made from carbon-based fuels in many cases, right? Yeah.
Yep.
It should be a good show. And Mike and I are certainly going to learn a lot.
Don't put the onus on me. I mean, it's a conversation to be had. We're all learning. That's the whole point. It's like we're all in this. This is kind of like the new frontier, and we're all learning about it. And to tease an article that we're developing right now with John Harrod for Fine Homebuilding. Just let's all get on the same page so we know what we're talking about in terms of our professional sector. Why?
Agreed.
Why is this an issue?
Agreed. Oh. Well, as always, it's been really nice talking to you all. Thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Kylie, Mike, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks so much for your questions and responses to the podcast. Please review it however you're listening. I said that once, but it really helps us out. And some of the old reviews are getting kind of stale and old. So if you could help us out with that, I would be grateful. Thanks, everybody.